you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. Introduced myself a little bit yesterday. I'm Stefan Dixon. I'm a DDSM for TCI out of Sterling, Virginia, which covers the DC metro area. Before that, I was a CSR for TCI down in Midway, Florida, which is just outside of Tallahassee, where I was born and raised. Worked 2 years there with Evan Parsons. Then I moved up to Virginia to be the DDSM there, worked for Carl Carlson, and I love selling tires. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. I realized it wasn't just a job anymore, it was a career. When every time I stop at a stoplight, you look over at the car next to you and you check out what kind of tires are on it, and you're curious, this, and if it's a Michelin, I always try to find out what kind of Michelin it is. So get really excited about selling tires. But when I'm not selling tires, in my free time, I like to do outdoor stuff. I used to fish and hunt a lot. I don't do that anymore now, really, that I'm up in Virginia. Did a lot more in Florida when I lived by the water, and you could do it 12 months out of the year. Now I have winter. I like to golf a lot too. Can't do that 12 months out of the year anymore up in Virginia, but I do it as often as I can. And then my most favorite thing is watching football with my buddies. And football is the most popular sport in the United States. Professional football is the most popular sport. Obviously, Jeff talked yesterday about being a season ticket holder for the Atlanta Falcons. Yes. Been a season ticket holder for years. Sorry you're missing the upcoming game. I know that's breaking your heart.
I will miss the Redskins game.
Yeah.
I'll be there this Sunday.
Evan preaches religiously about the New York Giants. They're not any good, but he's still a fan. Got a Jets fan over here. I'm a Dolphins fan. Bengals, right, Tim?
We'll be talking about them later.
Well, Louisiana over here. You guys, Tigers, college football? We Saints fans?
Gotta be Aints, man.
Superdome?
The hell with the Saints.
Is Drew Brees coming back?
We don't worry about it.
Well, professional football, like I said, love it too. We watch it every Sunday, but my first love is college football. I'm born and raised in Tallahassee, Florida. Big Seminole fan. Been going to games since I was 6 months old. Very first game I went when I was 6 months old. The stadium was much smaller then, wasn't 80,000 people there, so it was a little bit safer for a toddler. Dad was a huge fan, so he's down there yelling and screaming. Mom's got me up in the stands. The Florida State Seminoles surrendered that day and got beat badly by the Pitt Panthers. Their quarterback was a little-known guy named Dan Marino. Anybody ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he beat us up pretty good. Well, I want to start from the beginning. We'll start with the origins of college football. Anybody know when the first college football game was played?
Somewhere about a million years ago.
It was in 1869.
When was that? When you came?
They didn't have cameras really for football back then, so this is a rough illustration of what it was like. It was actually Princeton University lost to Rutgers University. Rutgers scored 6 goals to Princeton's 4 goals. The game was a little bit different back then. As you can see from this illustration, they played with something that was a lot more like a soccer ball. It was kind of oblong in shape. This is a rough picture of it. They didn't have them where you could fill them up with air back then. This actually was filled with horsehair. And there were 25 players on each side. The field was 125 yards long. They didn't have any lines. There wasn't any paint. They didn't know about first down markers. And there was really no uniformity to it at all whatsoever. And this is how the game was played, but everybody loved to play it. Other colleges got involved in it. The game grew and grew and grew until about 15 years later in the 1880s. A guy named Walter Camp, if you're big college football fans, you've probably heard his name go back, started to put some uniformity to it, started to change some things. They dropped it down to 15 players on each side of the field, made the field a little bit smaller, and then the popularity of the sport continued to grow and grow and grow until the 20th century, when at the beginning of the 1900s, there were over 250 collegiate teams. The very first team to actually ever build a stadium was Harvard. Poured a concrete stadium in 1903, but there was a big problem with the game. And even though it was the most popular game, it was growing like mad fire. They were thinking about discontinuing it. Anybody want to take a guess as to why?
Safety.
Still a problem today. Yeah, targeting is a big thing, but they didn't have rules, didn't have regulations. There was no associations involved with it. People weren't getting hurt. People were dying. I mean, and it was happening a lot. And so in 1912, colleges got together and they formed the National Collegiate Athletic Association, known as the NCAA, and that is correct. And then from them on, the game grew year after year after year. The biggest change in the game after that was the introduction of the forward pass. Mikey, who's your college team? Notre Dame took advantage of that forward pass rule. They went and beat a little team called Army 35-13 after the induction of the forward pass. And then the game continues to grow and grow and grow, much like the game we know today. They put lines on the field. That's when they started calling it the gridiron. Uniforms got numbers on the front and the back. Numbers were actually designated. Who can receive the ball, who can't receive the ball, who's on the line, linemen, so on and so forth. Got better equipment, got helmets, got uniformity. The game got safer, and they got it to where they needed a champion. And so they created the coaches poll. The coaches poll where all the coaches would vote for the top 25 teams. And at the end of the year, the number 1 team and the number 2 team would play each other for your national championship. This is how it went all the way until the heyday. Back in the 80s, we see the documentary The U. That's when Florida State really started getting good and growing. And then the BCS era came along and changed the landscape of how the national championships game were played. BCS era started in 1998, went to 2013, and then last year was the first year of the college football playoff. Rules and regulations and everything have changed till then. The forward pass has changed a lot, spread offenses and everything has moved quite forward since then, so on and so forth. But that's a brief history of college football. We got any questions on that?
They allow wolves in there now?
There are mascots called wolves, and they do have them on sidelines, but they're domesticated. Now I want to talk about my favorite football team. And the reason it's my favorite football team is legend, Coach Bobby Bowden, personal hero of mine, coached Florida State Seminoles for 33 years. But to start on the beginning, anybody familiar with Bobby? Love him, hate him, dadgummit, yeah. He's still around today, motivational speaker, 85 years old. But a little bit of background about Bobby, a lot of people don't know that he was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. He was an athletic kid, played football in high school. He was a quarterback and then ended up going and playing quarterback in college for a school there just outside of Birmingham, Alabama. Anybody want to take a guess where that was?
I guess it would be Alabama.
That is right. Bobby Bowden was quarterback for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Didn't stay there very long, though. Actually transferred to another school right there in the city of Birmingham. It's called Howard College, which is what would now be Samford College. Joined a fraternity there, played football, met his wife, Ann Bowden, who's still married to today. 6 children, over 20 grandchildren. Committed. He's the kind of coach he is. Started coaching at his alma mater there, stayed for a couple years. South Georgia University offered him a job to be the athletic director. And so he went over there for a couple years, but they liked him so much they made him the head football coach and the athletic director and the basketball coach and the football coach and the athletic director. And they also let him coach baseball too. So pretty popular at this point. The little school down in Tallahassee, Florida State, was just starting a football team. Florida State wasn't a girls' school until the mid-20th century, and then they actually let boys in, and then they started a football program. Grew it up. A guy named Burt Reynolds played there. Bobby Bowden, anyway, ended up coming and coaching in the early 60s, and he was one of the assistant coaches on the Florida State football team. And there were 2 other assistant coaches on there that he coached with that pretty popular. Anybody ever heard of Bill Parcells? Oh, yeah. Bill Parcells was an assistant coach with Bobby Bowden at Florida State University. And there's a famous Redskins coach, won a Super Bowl, also owns a NASCAR team. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Mr. Gibbs.
Joe Gibbs was also an assistant coach with Bill Parcells and Bobby Bowden at Florida State University in the mid-1960s. After that, West Virginia University came a-calling. Mountaineers, they had a very popular football program. This was in 1965. He went to go work for them. Was an assistant coach for a couple years. Head coach got offered a job down at Texas Tech, so he hightailed it out of there. Bobby Bowden became the next head coach in 1967. One of my favorite stories about the kind of person and coach that he was happened in 1970. There was a tragedy at Marshall University. Everybody familiar? Made a movie of it, We Are Marshall, and Bobby was in the movie for a brief moment. But when that tragedy happened, it happened at the end of the football season. Bobby Bowden went to the NCAA and said, hey, West Virginia wants to play Marshall's last game. We want to wear their jerseys. We want to, in memory of them, we want to go play for Marshall. And the NCAA denied them. They wouldn't let it do them. But for West Virginia's last game, they put Marshall tags on their helmets. A year later, when the Marshall football program came back, as you'll see in the movie, they were really struggling. They didn't have athletes. They really didn't have an offense. They didn't know what they were going to do. They went to Bobby Bowden and at West Virginia, you know, their in-state rival. And he gave them videotapes and books and showed them how to run a veer offense as opposed to a triple option offense.
That's 10 minutes.